In the brutal stillness of the Central Asian steppe, where the horizon swallows time and the wind whispers through ancient grass like ghosts of forgotten empires, a reckoning was beginning to unfold, one so fierce, so primal, that it would echo through history as a blood-stained lesson in pride, power, and the monstrous price of ambition. It was 530 BCE, and Cyrus the Great, the undisputed emperor of the largest empire the world had ever known, had finally met an enemy who would not kneel. Not on a battlefield, not in the shadow of his legendary reputation, and not in the gilded halls of diplomacy. This wasn't merely a clash of swords or empires, it was a collision of civilizations, of ideologies, of raw willpower. And it was about to erupt in a way that would shake the very bones of Persia. For 30 relentless years, Cyrus had devoured kingdoms and swallowed cultures whole. He was a man kissed by the gods, or so he believed, who moved through history with divine certainty, turning cities into tombs and resistance into memory. From the Fertile Crescent to the deserts of Egypt, his was a reign not only of iron and fire but of cunning restraint. He knew when to offer mercy, when to crown former enemies as satraps, when to bend so that he would not break. His conquests were not driven by lust for chaos, but by a vision: one world, one empire, beneath his rule. But even the most brilliant of rulers, when blinded by their own mythology, can mistake the edge of a blade for a thread of fate. When he turned his gaze to the lands beyond the Jaxartes River, it wasn't conquest he saw, it was inevitability. The Massagetæ were, in his eyes, little more than primitive nomads, raw meat and blood in human form. They worshipped the god of war above all others, drank a concoction of fermented milk and blood before battle, and buried their dead with weapons instead of prayers. Their very existence was an affront to the structured, disciplined world Cyrus believed he was building. And yet, it was precisely in this chaotic world that one of history's most enigmatic and fearsome women rose to power: Queen Tomyris. Tomyris did not wear a crown molded by inheritance or nobility. Her throne was earned through the screaming agony of battlefield trials, soaked in the blood of her enemies, and forged by victories no man could deny. In Massagetæ society, women fought alongside men, and rulership was a matter of strength, not gender. She was a warrior first, a mother second, and a sovereign last. When Cyrus extended his hand in marriage under the thin veil of alliance, Tomyris saw the blade hidden behind the silk. She refused, not with flattery or political games, but with unflinching contempt. Her words were not just a rejection, they were a declaration. There would be no submission, not through marriage, not through fear, not through the illusion of diplomacy. The sting of that rejection struck Cyrus deeper than any wound a spear could deliver. To him, this was not just defiance, it was humiliation. The great conqueror, turned away by a so-called barbarian queen. The insult festered in him like rot beneath golden armor. He would have his revenge, and he would not rest until Tomyris's lands were reduced to ash and her name chiseled beneath the boots of his soldiers. Thus began the final campaign of Cyrus the Great, one he believed would crown his legacy, but instead would end it in fire, blood, and horror. Cyrus's army crossed the Jaxartes with the precision of a machine, erecting bridges and advancing like an unstoppable tide. Scouts reported that the Massagetæ were retreating, abandoning their territory in apparent terror. Cyrus smiled. He believed this was yet another example of barbarian cowardice crumbling before Persian might. But he could not see the truth beneath the dust. Tomyris was not fleeing. She was luring him in, drawing him away from his supply lines, leading him deeper into lands that were more trap than terrain. The steppe was her weapon, an open, endless field that she had studied, survived, and mastered. Where Cyrus saw desolation, Tomyris saw opportunity. Her trap was as elegant as it was vicious. A decoy camp was established and baited with what the Persians most craved: food, wine, and the illusion of victory. The defenders put up just enough resistance to appear authentic, then vanished. Among the captives taken in this skirmish was none other than Spargopizes, the son of Tomyris. His capture was not a tactical win, it was a mistake Cyrus would regret for all eternity. Celebrating wildly, the Persian army indulged in the stolen wine, intoxicated by triumph and hubris. They had no idea that they had already begun dying. When word reached Tomyris that her son had been taken by the Persians, a storm awakened inside her that even the gods feared. She sent a message to Cyrus, cold and cutting, promising that if her son was not returned alive, she would give him more blood than he could ever drink. But it was already too late. Spargopizes, shamed by his capture, took his own life while in Persian custody. No blade pierced his body, but his spirit had been broken, and with his death, something inside Tomyris shattered. What followed was not war, it was extermination. It was vengeance carried out with surgical cruelty and ancestral rage. Tomyris unleashed the full force of the Massagetei in a counterattack so brutal, so unexpected, that the Persian army never had a chance to regroup. Trapped in unfamiliar terrain, bloated with alcohol, disoriented and leaderless, they were cut down like wheat before the scythe. The queen herself led the charge, cutting through enemy lines with a fury born of grief and righteous wrath. The battle turned into a massacre. Blood soaked the earth, skulls cracked beneath hooves. No quarter was given, none was asked for. And then came the final act, one that history would whisper for centuries in horror and awe. When Cyrus was found among the dead, Tomyris did not merely claim his corpse as a trophy. She ordered that his head be severed and submerged into a wineskin filled with blood, fulfilling her promise to the letter. "Drink your fill," she is said to have declared, "of the blood you thirsted for." This wasn't just revenge. It was a ritual, a punishment more symbolic and savage than any war crime. It was justice in a language that only the dead could truly understand. In the end, the man who conquered the world was conquered by a woman history tried to forget. His death sent shockwaves through Persia. His empire did not collapse, but something far more vital did: the illusion of invincibility. The story of Queen Tomyris is not just a tale of battlefield cunning or maternal vengeance. It is a grim reminder that no matter how powerful a ruler becomes, there will always be those who cannot be tamed, whose fury cannot be outmaneuvered, whose pain cannot be bought. And when these people rise not as rebels, but as executioners, they rewrite the legacy of empires. The wind howled across the steppes like a funeral song echoing through time, and the blood of kings seeped into soil that had never known a crown. But while Cyrus the Great lay dead with his severed head floating in a wineskin of vengeance, his empire did not collapse overnight. Persia, that great machine of conquest, continued to grind forward under new rulers. Yet in the hearts of those who carried his memory, there remained a haunting silence, a question left unanswered in the darkness. How had the greatest ruler of his age been undone, not by an army mightier than his own, but by a woman wielding not just steel, but something more terrifying? Purpose born of pain. This wasn't merely the end of one life, it was the unraveling of a myth. And that myth, once broken, became a warning etched into the bones of every future conqueror. Still, the tale of Tomyris does not end with Cyrus's death. What happened after the massacre reveals something far deeper, far stranger, about how ancient civilizations interpreted war, honor, and the wrath of a wounded soul. Tomyris did not march on Persepolis. She did not carve her name into Persian tablets or demand tributes from its satrapies. She didn't need to. Her message had already been burned into the Persian psyche. Instead, she returned to her people, her son avenged, her land unbroken, and her legend sealed. In the eyes of the Massagetei, she had not merely defeated an emperor, she had tamed a god. Because to them, Cyrus was no mere man. He was the storm that had swallowed cities, the shadow that had darkened continents. And she had torn him down not with an empire, but with ancestral cunning and maternal wrath. This victory was mythic. But myths, as time has proven, are fragile things. The Western world, shaped by Greco-Roman historians and later Enlightenment thinkers, often reduced Tomyris to a footnote, her story buried beneath debates over Herodotus's reliability or the logistics of ancient campaigns. But to the tribes of the Central Asian steppes, her story lived on in oral tradition, in carved stones, in whispered prayers to the war god that she herself once worshipped. Even today, across parts of Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan, her name evokes both reverence and fear. Not because she ruled long or built monuments, but because she proved something timeless, that when the rage of the forgotten is harnessed, it can eclipse the glory of empires. Yet for all the clarity of her vengeance, the story leaves behind a disturbing legacy. What kind of world forces a mother to become a butcher? What kind of civilization drives its women to lead charges soaked in the blood of their own children? And perhaps the darkest question of all, did Tomyris ever find peace after that day? There are no scrolls that tell us what became of her heart, no letters detailing how she mourned. But human history is painted in patterns, and from those patterns we can imagine the truth. She likely lived the rest of her days surrounded by the silence of survivors. Every Massagetei elder who retold her tale must have seen the weight she carried. In cultures where victory and grief dance side by side, peace is often the one thing even the victorious are denied. Meanwhile, in Persia, the death of Cyrus shattered the illusion of divine right. His son Cambyses too would inherit the throne, but never the same loyalty or reverence. The shadow of Tomyris loomed over every future campaign, a specter of humiliation Persia never truly exorcised. Later Persian kings, including Darius and Xerxes, would carry that ancient bitterness with them into Greece, into Egypt, into India, seeking glory as if to drown out the shame of that northern defeat. And yet, the more they expanded, the more the lesson of Tomyris proved true, that power without understanding is a curse, not a blessing, that the fury of the underestimated, the dishonored, and the wounded can tear down even the most divine crowns. Herodotus, writing from a world far removed from the blood and soil of the steppes, claimed that Cyrus was warned. He said advisors cautioned him against attacking the Massagetæ, against underestimating their queen. But pride is a deaf god, and Cyrus believed himself immortal until he wasn't. But what makes this tale more than just a brutal anecdote from ancient warfare is how eerily it mirrors the psychological truths that still govern power today. We like to believe history moves forward, that we evolve. But time and again, the same drama unfolds. A ruler crowned in glory begins to believe he is untouchable. He stretches his reach, underestimates the barbarians, mocks their ways, and believes that force and cleverness will carry the day. And then just like that his blood is spilled by someone he never saw coming. Not always with swords, sometimes with revolutions, sometimes with scandals, sometimes with bullets. But the pattern is always the same. Tomyris' story is not just about war or empire, it's about the dangerous illusions that come with power, the belief that strength is enough, that control equals respect, that fear is loyalty. And most of all, the fatal arrogance of assuming that anyone who lives differently must live beneath you. Cyrus learned that lesson in the most grotesque way imaginable. He didn't die from poor strategy or military failure. He died from misunderstanding the soul of his enemy. He thought he was facing a tribe, but what stood before him was a mother, a queen, and a force of nature sculpted by a lifetime of surviving the cruel, unyielding land her people called home. And so the world turned. Cyrus became a memory, his monuments crumbling, his legacy debated by scholars who never knew the terror of that final day. But Tomyris, her story lives on in the shadows. It isn't taught in most schools. It doesn't sit at the center of ancient history lectures, but it persists, because deep down, we know the truth she embodied. That when history forgets its margins, when it mocks the quiet strength of the oppressed, when it dismisses the fury of a wounded heart, it invites a reckoning, one that no army can stop. Even now, millennia later, the silence after her name is spoken feels heavy. Not because she was cruel, but because she was necessary. Because she reminds us of the kind of strength that cannot be measured in territory or titles, only in blood, fire, and the choices we're forced to make when no other path remains. The kind of strength that carves itself into the bedrock of human memory and waits like the wind on the steppes for someone to listen again.